Okay, so let's talk about your scenario and see if we can get to the bottom of things. Why don't you just begin kind of like, yeah, begin at the beginning.
Yeah, so working on my throws a lot, happy where they are. But I've noticed that when I'm out like solo drilling, and really like taking time to think about my form, my just accuracy and results go way down from how they are like when I'm playing in practice or in-game scenarios, like when I'm throwing in flow, not thinking about it, they're fine. But then if I go to actually like think and focus on it, um, I get to where I want to be, but there's a lot more mistakes that happen along the way. And
Okay,
it's,
so hold on, let me make sure I understand. So
yeah,
just like
yeah,
so right now the your throws are better in games
mhm,
and in flow than they
yeah,
are when you're practicing.
yes.
So why is that a problem?
Um, I guess it's, yeah, if you look at it like that, it's not a problem if they're doing well in game scenarios. Just personally, it's confusing, I guess, when I want to like really think about form and take the time to like be mindful about it. That it turns out not as good as when I'm just not thinking about it.
Okay, all right. So I think maybe I can solve this. So it sounds like it's just like a all right, here's my analysis. I think it's just you have your expectations of how this works are just not correct. so,
Sure. Yeah.
so 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 what you're describing is exactly as things should be, right? When you're not thinking, that's when you're executing, right? And that's when I talk a lot about the difference between your sports brain and your logical or academic brain, right? Or your conscious
Yeah.
brain. So when you're throwing, when you're in flow, that's when your sports brain should be in charge. It shouldn't feel like you're thinking. And that's when your sports brain is executing the skills that it already has. Okay.
Mm,
So whatever your throws are in that environment, that's your skill. Okay.
mm,
Does that make sense so far? All right. Now, what you're saying is like, oh, but when I go and like work on my throws, when I go and like work on and try to work on my throws and make them better, they get worse. Is that kind of like what it feels like?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, but that's how it should be. So, so basically, what's happening when you're trying and when you're concentrating on different pieces of your form, what you're doing is you're engaging a bit of your conscious brain, you're engaging a bit of your logical brain. But that is that. um, so that part of the brain is not what's in charge when you're actually on the field.
Mm,
It's not wrong per se to engage it when you're practicing, especially if you're trying to focus on specific, yeah, form issues. But it's not unusual that when you have the conscious brain engaged, that your execution then wouldn't be as good. But let's maybe dive into the details of what exactly it is that you're practicing, and maybe I can give you a little bit of tips on how to make sure. Basically, maybe what I'm guessing the problem is like you're wondering if your practice is effective. If like when you're trying to practice, you're not getting the throws that you want.
I think um I think at the end of the day it is effective because
Okay.
my throws like in game
Uh-huh.
are better the more I practice,
Okay.
even though during the practice it might be like, you know, I know I can do this, but it's just not happening sometimes. And then in
Okay.
game it does happen.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So is it possible that there is no problem?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Never
let's
looked
so
at it like that, but yeah.
yeah. Okay, right. But I mean that's I think at least helpful to know, right? When you know how things work, your expectations then are maybe more aligned with reality.
Yeah,
Maybe takes
yeah. It's
some of the
definitely
frustration.
a helpful perspective, I think, to have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then remember the point of practice is to perform well in games. The point of practice is not to perform well in practice.
Yeah.
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 And
That makes
kind of
sense.
another kind of maybe mental shift that might be helpful is like if I'm running practice for like a team or for myself, like I think like around you want to be at the edge of your comfort zone, at the edge of your skill level. That's where it grows, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
during practice, if you're at the edge, like let's say that you want to be doing something that maybe you can be 80% successful in, right?
Mhm.
70 to 80%. If you have something where you're only 50% successful, well, maybe you're practicing something that's like too far beyond your skill. If you're 90% or above successful, well, you're not really outside of your zone enough to
Yeah.
really push your improvement. So, you know, if during your practice you're feeling like, okay, this is like 80% of the way there, like that, maybe you might actually be in the sweet spot of where you need to be.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think part of the practice I am like in that kind of edge zone where it's like 70 to 80%. I think what made me even ask this or ask for this call in the first place was when I'm doing throws, maybe towards the beginning of practice when I'm warming up, where I'm like, got these down pat, but then I don't, essentially. At least like solo throwing, but like, you know.
Wait. Tell me again. So when you're at practice warming up, your throws are looking good, and then then during team practice, you're sometimes having difficulty. Is that
Sorry, no. When I'm like on my own practicing
mm.
and I'm doing warming up, so like my practice will be I'll start out with stuff that like, you know, I'm almost 100% feel good on, and then I'll ramp up to like the edge stuff at the end. And so kind of in that middle beginning space on stuff that I feel like I've really got down pat is when I start to notice a big difference between like I've got them down pat in game, but then when I go and practice, just even just as a warm up, sometimes, you know, they're way more off than I would notice them being in a game scenario.
Okay. Is it possible that in a game scenario you're already warmed up physically?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe okay. So gonna just ask some dumb questions here. So what else do you need right now? Like is this all you needed? Is there another problem you're trying to solve?
No, I think that was about it. Just want to get some perspective on that specific issue.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, maybe another question would be, is there any specific thing that you're trying to practice where you're noticing this dynamic where you're not performing as well as you want to when you're practicing it?
I don't think there is one particular like throw or skill that is outside of this is worse than what we're talking about.
Okay. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what is it basically like you're doing throwing practice? Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about how you do your throwing practice?
Yeah. So I actually took a lot of notes from I forget what it was called, but your package about a year ago where it was like a lot of drills and stuff. So I took a lot of those throwing drills and they kind of turned into what I'm doing now. So I'll start at like essentially have like a baseball net. I'll start at like, 10 yards out, then 25, then going up to like 40 or 50, doing reps of like 5 sets of 5 throws, working on like backhand and forehand, all that stuff, different edges. And I go, the distance just increases over the practice, and then it gets more into, more like creative edge stuff. Yeah, that's essentially the practice.
Okay. I can think of one quick suggestion if you want it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned doing 5 sets of 5 throws.
Mm-hmm.
So is that like you're doing like 5 forehands, 5 backhands, 5 outside ins, 5 inside outs, something like this? Okay.
Well,
so what
I'll do 5 sets of 5 of the same throw.
Right.
Yeah.
5 sets of 5 of the same throw. Wait, explain to me.
So I'm doing I'll do like 25 forehands at 10 yards out, then 25 at 25 yards out, then 25 hucks it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the suggestion will be even more helpful then. So there's there's a Ultra World article I wrote. I forget what it's called. Oh, simple improvements in throwing practice, something like this. Anyway, one of the most well-studied phenomenons in motor skills learning is the idea of randomized practice. Now, the reason that people don't do randomized practice is because it looks shittier. Because like when you're doing randomized practice, your performance is not going to be as good. Randomized practice would be more like you're throwing a backhand, then you're throwing a forehand, then an inside out backhand, then maybe you're going to fake forehand and throw a backhand. Like basically like every throw you throw is going to be different from the one before it. And the reason you want to do this, the theory is that like, when you're when you're practicing a motor skill, your brain is like laying down myelin, or like it's creating these motor neural pathways, right? The idea is like if you do the same thing, exact thing over and over again, it's like there's a residual pattern that's there. So it's like it's almost like you're not practicing recreating the pattern anew. And basically it just kind of takes away some of the efficacy of that repetition. Again, this is like the result is well studied. The process is maybe not totally as solidly known. But what is well studied is like the idea of performance after randomized practice over time versus performance of blocked practice. So it sounds like what you're doing is blocked practice, where you're doing like the same thing, then you're doing the same thing of something else, and the same thing of something else. So what I'd recommend is doing randomized practice instead. And whether you keep count of all the throws you do or not, is fine. But what I tend to do, you know, is I tend to have like 1 or 2 focused throws that I'm working on at a time in my throwing practice. And so like say I'm working on my skewer, I'll throw a skewer and then I'll do like maybe forehand big to backhand, then I'll throw a skewer, and then I'll throw a backhand, and then I'll throw a skewer, and then I'll throw an outside. Like basically I'll kind of like just do more repetitions of my focused throws, the things that I know I'm working on specifically, by intermixing them with just all the other stuff. Now when you do your practice that way, your practice session, might feel like, oh yeah, it's harder, right? But again, it's like, doesn't matter what practice looks like, all that matters is what shows up on the performance field. So
okay, I'll try out a randomized practice.
Okay, excellent. Let me know how it goes. I'm gonna make your practice worse, but we're gonna make your performance better, I promise.
I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.